Hello and welcome to India's World. The United States under the Trump administration seems to be undertaking a review of its Afghanistan-Pakistan policy. The top military commander of US and NATO troops in Afghanistan, General John Nicholson Jr., has called for a holistic review of the US policy towards Pakistan. While President Obama had declared that the official combat mission in Afghanistan was over in 2014, roughly 13,000 international troops, of them about 8,400 US troops, remain in that country. General Nicholson, however, has also hinted at the need for deployment of a few thousand more US troops in Afghanistan if the war against terrorism is to be won. Up to now, hardly any details have emerged of the possible new American strategy in Afghanistan and Pakistan. As the US rethinks its Af-pak policy, we ask what could be the elements of President Trump's policy towards that region and the factors that could shape it. To discuss this, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Vivek Katju, a former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. He's been India's ambassador to Myanmar, Thailand and Afghanistan. He was in charge of overseeing Iran, Pakistan and Afghanistan region for 6 years in the Indian Foreign Office. We also have with us Ms. Rana Banerji, a former Indian Administrative Service officer. He was Special Secretary in India's External Intelligence Agency Research and Analysis Wing, or RNAW. He's a security expert and intelligence expert who specializes in the South Asian region. We have with us Dr. Ashok Behuria. He's a senior fellow at the Institute for Defence Studies and Analysis, New Delhi, a strategic affairs expert. He specializes on South Asia, especially Pakistan. I welcome all of you to this discussion. Vivek, let me begin with you. Do you think that a re-evaluation of American Af-pak policy is going on, or do you think we'll see more of the same?
I think in order to address this, 3 points are important. The first are intertwined, the first two are intertwined, and they are: one, is the Taliban ready for peace with Kabul? Which means that are they willing to have some kind of an accommodated approach under Haibatullah? There are no answers, definite answers to that. The second is Pakistan willing to re-evaluate its basic thrust towards Afghanistan, which is to have a preponderant influence over Afghanistan's external policies, especially towards India. And the third is, what are the Russians and the Iranians up to in Afghanistan? Because the indications are, and this is what's been made clear in Nicholson's testimony, that they are in bed with the Taliban now, and some people have even mentioned to me, some knowledgeable Afghans, that they are convinced that the Iranians are supplying weapons to the Taliban. I think as Trump's policy evolves, he will have to address these issues in particular.
Okay. Rana, one important question that the US has been asking is this: can it ever win its fight against terrorism as long as Pakistan does not end its support to the extremist groups operating in Afghanistan and who retreat back to Pakistan, who find shelter and protection in Pakistan? What would be your answer to this?
Well, this is part of the continuing US rhetoric, which sort of ranges from the hard line to the, staying on the incentives frame. That is to say, you put some pressure on Pakistan and then you find that when they are trying to make some accommodations, then you go along with them. And I think Vivek has put it very interestingly, the three factors that he has pointed out. The whole thing would depend on how issues in this regard evolve. Recently, there are reports emanating about a lot of factionalism developing within the Afghan Taliban, and the Mansoor elements, that is now Mullah Rahim mainly in Helmand, and Gul Agha, who controlled the finances. Akhundzada has been ineffective in asserting his leadership. Pakistanis are slowly trying to regulate the Ishaqzai element among the Taliban inside the safe havens that they have been monitoring inside Pakistan, in the refugee camps. A lot of refugees are being slowly weeded out. So the whole thing is evolving, and also there is some battle fatigue among commanders, which has led to a concept of peacemaking with insurgents. And within this backdrop, of course, the Iranians and the Russians have come in to help the Mullah Rahim faction of the Taliban, and to suggest a separate sort of peacemaking deal, keeping the US out but engaging everybody else.
How many factions are there, and are they all protected and sheltered in Pakistan?
Well, mainly you see there are two main groups. One is the Mullah Rahim group and one is the Sirajuddin Haqqani network. The Sirajuddin Haqqani network is lying low at present, has some presence in east and in Uruzgan. But Mullah Rahim faction is powerful in Helmand and also in some parts of the west and the north. They are being held at bay by the ISAF, which are now being guided more and more with greater strategic, guidance from the Americans. They are also getting some American equipment, and American trained Afghan pilots have come in now. So that has helped the ISAF firepower.
My question really was, and let me take this to Ashok, that as long as Pakistan protects these groups which are operating against the government in Kabul, can America ever stabilize Afghanistan?
See, after Trump came in, the people thought he will wield more stick than carrot. That is the larger conclusion people are making. But as the previous speaker said, lot remains to be seen how the Afghan theatre itself is emerging and how things are happening within that Afghan theatre. At the moment, it seems, as Nicholson had said, too many things to too many guys. Like he is everything to everybody. At one level, he has cast aspersion on Iran and Russia also coming together, how things are developing there. At another level, he has identified TTP as a threat to Taliban and Afghanistan, and he has said that
that is Tehreek-e-Taliban
Pakistan, and most of the IS elements are being sent by TTP to fight in Syria. So the point I am making is, at one level they are saying that the concerns of Iran and Russia about IS is not unfounded. At another level, he is saying that their interference might complicate issues rather than address them. At this moment, if you say Pakistan is interfering, it is everybody knows, it is a truism, everybody knows it. But my point is, there are elements within Taliban at the moment which are perhaps defying Pakistan rather than acting with them. B, there is lot of efforts at the level of Pakistan and Taliban to bring several factions together, which manifested in the shape of Mullah Omar's brother Manan heading a delegation to Qatar. So it is a lot of things are happening. Taliban is also coming out with contradictory signals. At one level they are saying we should talk, at another level they are saying that we should not. So all in all, we are poised for very interesting
Vivek, you wanted to say something, but let me also ask you something else. What are US interests in the region, and are they limited only to counter-terrorism?
No, they are not. Let me answer your question straight away. No, they are not. I think US's primary interest is to ensure the stability of Pakistan, because Pakistan is a nuclear weapon state. It is not a failed state or a failing state, but it's a fragile state. And they don't want to have a nightmarish scenario of a state with nuclear weapons of the kind Pakistan just exploding. So that, to my mind, has crippled their Afghan policy ever since 2001, since they went in. They haven't been able to square the circles which are there. On the Taliban, for instance, yes, some groups are perhaps a little more active in Helmand and Afghanistan, but clearly all these groups have nexus with someone or the other in Pakistan.
They're based in Quetta.
They're based in Quetta. So therefore, if the Pakistanis actually want to squeeze any faction, they can put a tremendous squeeze. There will be a backlash which they will have to absorb. But they are playing with all groups. They have a Habatullah, I think, is really the chap of choice at the moment. But they're playing with everyone.
Okay, all right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are exploring what could be the contours of President Donald Trump's Af-pak policy. Rana, when a question about Pakistan's support to Taliban, Afghan Taliban and other insurgent groups based in Pakistan was put to General Nicholson in the Senate Armed Forces Committee, he said that US needs to do a holistic review of its policy towards Pakistan. Now this is being interpreted in various ways. How would you interpret it? What would a holistic review of US policy towards this region mean?
Well, ostensibly it would involve a hardening sort of a crackdown that you see, unless Haqqani network is totally controlled, they will stop aid. That would be the worst case scenario. But Pakistanis are, not overly concerned by this statement. They say that it is not much of a departure from his previous positions. So what I envisage is, if you read it also with General Mattis's testimony at his confirmation, he said there is a need to engage with Pakistan and incentivize its sort of responses. So this is a bit of old wine in a new bottle. So they would sort of engage in some muscle flexing rhetoric, but eventually come back to ensuring that Pakistan extends a degree of cooperation, and that is evident in the recent sort of screening of Afghan refugees that the Pakistanis have been doing at their border camps, and also rumors about some more controls likely to be put with American blessings on some factions.
Okay, Ashok, before I come to you, let me just take this aspect of Afghanistan to Vivek, who's been our ambassador there. Nicholson also argued that there is a need for more troops. He said a few thousand more troops if the situation, if the stalemate in Afghanistan is to be broken. Do you think that the idea of sending more troops will be acceptable to the American people who have already been frustrated by the length and cost of this conflict? Apparently, even today, the war in Afghanistan is costing the US taxpayer $13 million a day. So when you ask for more troops, is that a realistic possibility?
I think what he is saying is that if you want to maintain a balance, which means that if you want this, he said also that there is a stalemate. So what he is saying is that if you don't want the situation to become adverse to the Kabul authorities, you have to send in some more troops for combat assistance, because they are training and there is some support for combat. Now, I personally think that within Congress, as long as the demand for troops is not in the tens of thousands, it's not like the Obama surge, I think more eyebrows, that eyebrows will not be raised. I don't expect any major opposition up to 3,000 to 5,000 troops.
Okay. Ashok, on Pakistan, there was a report released earlier this week by the Hudson Institute, Washington-based think tank, which called for a new US approach to Pakistan and said that the Trump administration should make it more and more costly for Pakistani leaders to employ a strategy of supporting terrorist proxies to achieve regional strategic goals. Now, what could be the various components of such an approach? One could, of course, be, as he said, be very harsh with Pakistan, but what would that mean? How would you make it costly for Pakistan to support Afghan Taliban and other insurgents who are destabilizing Afghanistan?
If you look at the Trump administration's overtures so far, one would imagine that he will have a more headline policy towards Pakistan and Afghanistan. But what we see in reality, what Nicholson has said, it is in line with the outgoing Obama administration's point of view on Afghanistan. Obama administration was seriously thinking of increasing the numbers. But then increasing the numbers by 2,000, 3,000 is not going to change the ground situation drastically.
I meant what should they do with Pakistan so that it becomes costly for Pakistan to keep supporting these insurgents?
One way is to rein in the Haqqani group and also driving the Taliban to the table, to the negotiating table. At the moment, they are in a dilemma as to what to do. And especially, it will depend on how the Trump administration is dealing with Pakistan. If they are taking a departure from Obama administration and adopting a headline, what kind of reaction they will have towards their policy in Afghanistan remains to be seen. And especially in this context, with this Russia, China and Pakistan coming together is also playing up in the minds of the administration in US as well. Yeah. So one doesn't know how they will deal with the Pakistani approach to Afghanistan.
So let me ask you this, Rana. Do you think that there could be a harsher approach in terms of reduction of economic and military support, increasing number of drone strikes in the Af-pak border, sanctions against some Pakistani-based entities, organizations as well as individuals who are close to these terrorists or supporting these groups?
See, in the short term, the answer is no, not in response to the Hudson Institute report, because even in the course of presentation of the Hudson Institute report, Hussain Haqqani was heckled very badly by Americans who were mouthing some prepared statements which the Pakistan embassy in Washington had given to them, and some people were made to walk out in this presentation. So the credibility of the Hudson Institute is likely to be tempered a little bit by balancing with some other,
Incentives.
pro-Pakistani US think tank views, such as those of the Stimson Center and others. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is, of course, there is talk, that you could move towards declaring Pakistan as a, state sponsoring terrorism and then cut off funds, or, the view that Hafiz Mohammad Saeed's detention has been done to sort of checkmate any such, preempt any such, measure from the Americans. So all these things are more rational, or a reasoned view would be taken in consult between the Pakistani government and the American authorities.
Okay, quickly.
Look, they can put the squeeze on. Say, if nothing else, of travel bans of certain Pakistani individuals, certain, say, officials of the ISI.
They have not let a senator
go. So they have an enormous amount of scope for embarrassing the Pakistani state.
But will it serve their objectives?
No, that is the whole question, that they feel that they need Pakistan's assistance in Afghanistan. So, and they don't want the Pakistanis to go down the tube. So therefore, plus they have two other constraints. One is, how will China react to this? And the second is, what kind of sabotage can the Pakistanis do in the wider Islamic world? Within these constraints, the Americans' room of maneuver is severely limited. And therefore, I feel that whatever they may say, beyond symbolism, will they be able to do it to make it more costly for Pakistan? Yes, in embarrassment terms, yes, but substantively, there are question marks.
Yes, objective is what is more important,
Yes.
not to embarrass people. Anyway, we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back in a bit. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing a possible US rethink on its Af-pak policy under the Trump administration. Rana, when General Nicholson, in the same hearing that we were discussing earlier, said that Russia, Pakistan and Iran were working to legitimize and support the Taliban in Afghanistan, one can understand what he was saying about Pakistan. But what precisely have the Russians and the Iranians been doing to legitimize the Taliban? Vivek said that Iran is possibly supplying them weapons. What purpose does it serve?
See, there are two aspects to it. One is that, some elements of TTP have morphed into IS or the Vilayat-e-Khorasan inside Afghanistan. That is mostly in the eastern part of Nangarhar and Achin. So some of these elements could go into, disturbed areas of Chechnya and all that, which the Russians would not like. That is one aspect. The other aspect is that at present, some of the Taliban factions are short of funds. They are squeezed for money. Haibatullah has been ineffective to distribute money. Mansoor group has controlled some of the new funds coming from drug revenues. So both the Iranians and the Russians are possibly helping with funds in return for a quid pro quo, not to disturb areas within the Near East of Russia.
Vivek, do you agree with him? Or do you think the US objection is more to the Russians actually making an overture to Taliban and talking to the Taliban while keeping the Kabul administration out?
I think the Russians and the Iranians have no love lost for the national unity government. But I do believe that the policy, Russian policy of opening up to the Taliban is short-sighted. Because if the TTP is morphing into IS, then it's not an Afghan faction. Their quarrel has to be with Pakistan, and they need to press Pakistan to control.
Okay.
And by adding to the confusion here in Afghanistan, they are not strengthening their own security in the Near East. Therefore, I am compelled to believe that this is part of the larger design of Putin to take on the Americans. And let us see with the new America, with Trump now, how this plays out.
And Iran, you stick to what you said earlier, that they are supplying weapons to...
That is, no, I said this is what some senior Afghans, believe.
Okay.
I have no evidence.
Okay.
To indicate
Ashok, Russian President's special envoy for Afghanistan, Zamir Kabulov, has said that Russia is ready to work with the US and NATO on the settlement of common issues in Afghanistan. Do you think such cooperation is in the offing under President Trump, who is not as inimical to Russia as his predecessor?
Now, one would expect there will be more conversation on Afghanistan, but how it will pan out, one doesn't know, because the basic Russian suspicion that Americans in consort with Kabul administration, they are supporting IS. This is something that has to be addressed. So how they are going to address it remains to be seen. But in this context, you must see how the Afghans themselves are looking at it. The Afghan government has signed a deal with Hekmatyar, and Hekmatyar is having a lot of conversations with the Pakistani intelligence as well. And
well, he was controlled by them at one point, but then Gulbuddin Hekmatyar moved to Iran, I thought.
Yes, yes. So he is somebody that you must look at. He has support from Iran. He has now been backed by Pakistan, and he has signed a deal with the Kabul administration.
You don't agree?
No, I find the Russian apprehensions that that Kabul
the point
is building up the IS, frankly, to be bizarre.
Okay.
How is
I
it in
understand
Kabul's
that.
interest?
Yeah.
I understand
So that is why I link it to the larger global strategy.
No. The point I'm making is, at this moment, the Russians have a fear that IS is being propped up by regional countries like. They also, if you look at the Pakistani vernacular media, they're full of this allegation that Americans, Indians, and the NDS, the intelligence wing of Kabul government, they are the ones who are propping up IS in opposition to Taliban. So this may be absolutely wrong, but in matters relating to security and foreign policy, such perceptions matter.
Okay.
So the Russians have to be disabused of this belief. If this Trump administration is going to talk to Putin and his administration, and Kabulov has come out and said that we are going to have more conversations, I think this basic fear has to be addressed.
Okay.
I think Russian intelligence is fairly good.
Okay, Rana, let's move to India. How does US Af-pak policy impact India? Is one of the aims of US Af-pak policy also to see to it that Pakistan gets stabilized and there is no India-Pakistan conflict, military conflict?
Well, you see, as long as the Pakistanis see their whole policy approach in Afghanistan to keep out India as being the major strategic goal, then it doesn't help us to endorse the Quad process, for instance, which keeps India out in peacemaking. Whereas if there is a Russian initiative for a six-nation meeting for taking the peace process forward, that is a preferable option. As against that, you see, the Americans lately have been welcoming whatever assistance India has been giving, particularly in military terms, to the National Unity Government's efforts to prop up the ANA against the Taliban. So, and there is also this perception that whatever is in Pakistan, whatever is happening today adverse to Pakistan in Afghanistan is at the behest of Americans and Indians jointly. So as long as this perception persists, their concept of strategic depth is negated. So this is a fairly welcome situation for us.
Vivek, while welcoming US attempts, if we see such attempts to prevent Pakistan from supporting terrorists operating out of its territory to gain strategic advantage, Afghanistan as well as in India, how can India ensure that the US does not get drawn into the Kashmir issue?
I think the experience of the US generally has been that entering into the Kashmir issue is fraught with great danger, and therefore it's best to stay away. In 2009, you'll recollect, they had some thoughts on this, with Holbrooke wanting a India, Afghanistan, Pakistan kind of a thing, in which we were able to finish. However, or was it 2011? However, the fact is that with Trump's being so mercurial, he may attempt a certain vision of trying to bring about a rapprochement, and we'll have to take a very firm line there.
And what would be that firm line?
Firm line is to indicate to him it's not acceptable, because the American standard position is that we will not mediate unless both sides want us. So we say we don't want.
Okay, all right. We have to end this discussion at this point because we really don't know what the Af-pak policy is going to be like. We only have some straws in the winds. And thank you for discussing them for our viewers. I'd like to thank Ashok Behuria, Mr. Rana, Banerji, Ambassador Vivek, Katju for coming here and discussing this subject. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Until then, goodbye and thanks for watching India's World.